Good afternoon, everybody who is attending so far. We're going to start this at 3:30, pretty much on the dot. We just wanted to make sure everyone knew they were in the right spot. This is the Livability strategy session for Kansas City, Missouri's comp plan update. I'll be talking to you guys off and on before we start, just as we greet new people. So thanks for joining us.
Got 23 people in here already. Looks like Jay needs to be promoted.
And I assume you meant I need to be promoted in the Zoom meeting, but I do appreciate your vote of support for my promotion at work.
Yeah, but just let me know. Write a letter, I'll sign it.
Sounds good.
Thanks to those of you who are joining us. We will start right at 3:30. This is the Livability strategy session, the first one of them so far. It will last about an hour and a half. We'll walk you through the process in just a moment. Thanks for joining us. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. As people join us, we'll help them into the process. My name is Kyle Elliott. I manage the long-range planning division of the Kansas City, Missouri's planning department. We're talking to you today about update to the city's comprehensive plan. The sessions that we're going to work on today are the livability sessions. It'll be about an hour and a half meeting. In just a moment, I'm going to hand it over to our director, Jeff Williams, to kind of give us some more intros, and we'll do some brief housekeeping. But once again, be about an hour and a half. We're going to make sure you're in and out, and it's going to be very interactive as we go forward. The majority of the presentation will be given by a couple of our consultants with staff trying to answer as many questions as we can. With that, I'm going to hand it over to our director, Jeff Williams, so he can kind of give us an introduction.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. As Kyle said, I'm Jeff Williams, Director of City Planning and Development. Thank you very much for joining us for our first in a series of meetings related to the livability elements of the KC Spirit Playbook, which is the updating of the city's comprehensive plan. For some of you today, if it's your first meeting, we ask for you to hang in there with us as we provide a bit of an overview, let you know where we've been, where we're headed to, and we dive into some questions. Our goal is always to have this be interactive, and in a moment, you'll hear guidance from staff from City Planning Development, along with our consultant team to take you through some of the technology portions of the day and to let you know what kind of exercises we'll all be working on together. But I really appreciate that. For someone with you're continuing with us, you'll see we're picking up on topics we previously discussed, and we're building upon work that has previously been done not only really through community input, with staff support, and with consultant support. So again, thank you all for being here. It'll be an hour and a half where I hope that we've inspired you to share your thoughts about the future of Kansas City over the next 20 years. I hope it leads to questions, and we'll talk about how the best way to capture some of those questions. And ultimately at the end, we'll ask you the big questions. What questions are we not asking as it relates to livability in Kansas City, Missouri, in the city that we all want us to be as we work over the next 20 years of physically growing and developing. So with that, I'll turn things back over to our staff and the comp plan team, and thanks to all of them for all the work they put into make today's meeting happen. So let me turn it over so we can go through some of the logistics regarding a meeting setup. I believe that is you, Kyle. Yes?
Yeah, it's back to me. Thank you, Director Williams. Thanks, everybody. For those of you that have went through our process or our meetings on Zoom, we're just going to run through some of the quick things. When you have comments, please feel free to use the chat feature. It's on the bottom screen. What we do with that is we make sure that we direct those comments towards the meeting, and we try to keep the comments back and forth to each other as positive as possible, even though we understand different opinions may be in there. If you have a question that you want to bring up verbally, please use the raised your hand feature. Staff will answer as many questions as possible. And if there are questions that come up that really aren't related to the comprehensive plan or related to things that current members of staff can answer, we'll let you know that as well, and we'll try to get you in contact with the right people. Next slide. We will be using a Minty Meter pool as we go, pooling tool as we go forward. And that allows you guys to basically engage in the process, and kind of, we'll do a couple tests of that too, to let you understand how that works. And I think that's pretty much all of the housekeeping issues. Once again, if you have a question as we go forward, please use the chats. Please keep it as positive as possible, and we're very glad that you joined us. Thanks.
Hey, Jay, do you want to go ahead and do the meeting overview?
Yes, for sure. So welcome everyone. Glad to have you all here. Hope we can get some really great feedback from you all. That's really the main purpose of this meeting, is get feedback from you to help set that direction, like Director Williams said. So we're talking about livability, what it means to you. We want to talk through what we have done already with the KC Spirit Playbook, the goals or connections of livability, and then really, again, that vision for improved neighborhood livability in Kansas City. And then we'll talk about next steps and other opportunities to engage throughout the plan process. So when we're thinking about this, we want to definitely maintain a really big, wide view of this. We're trying to set that direction for neighborhood livability and access to quality housing, but for the whole city, and in an aspirational way. So looking towards the next 5, 10, 20 years, and what does that big picture look like, and how can we achieve livability for all our residents? We want to hear everything from your perspective, your issues, your values, your priorities, and help identify those challenges, opportunities, and implementation pathways. And finally, we really would like you all to act as champions for this plan at the end of it. Hopefully we've done a good job of engaging, hearing your voices, moving forward, and that can help you all help move this forward and move the city forward as time goes on. So we have done quite a bit of data collection and inventory already. We have a dashboard. We have the link on the screen there. We'll actually put the link in the chat because I know you can't click on that link on the shared screen, but we'll put that in there. There's a lot of information on how we live, demographics of the city, housing features, other things. There's also information on mobility and other aspects on that same dashboard. And then just a couple of the other items that our planning team will be doing with the competitive cities review, looking at how are other cities tackling these issues, looking at external funding opportunities. There's a lot of federal grants and federal funding for issues related to livability. And then also looking through the Kansas City, Missouri policies and procedures, how we do things today, and are there any ways that we can improve our processes. As we go towards implementation or writing the plan, some of the key things what we'll be looking at are performance indicators, these key performance indicators. How do we measure success? What does success look like? And what should we track into the future to show if we are succeeding with our plan or not? We'll be talking through livability scenarios. We've developed some personas through the engagement efforts so far of different kind of mock people in the city that represent different backgrounds, different geographies, and how would some of these changes that we're recommending affect those people individually, so we can have a bit more of a human perspective on things. Again, looking at policies and procedure recommendations, and then implementation recommendations, and those will come, we'll work through those and engage on those through subsequent strategy sessions, come back to you all once we have some drafts done, engage your feedback on those. And now I'm going to turn it over to Morgan to talk through some of the other efforts in the city.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So the community engagement that we have been doing since about May of 2020 has been primarily online through our Kansas City Spirit Playbook website. There are dozens of surveys and activities that we've done there, and we will continue to do that online engagement for those people who are unable to attend these strategy sessions, these public meetings. We want everyone to have a chance to be able to participate in not only just the process, but these public meetings as well. So these virtual meetings, they will be posted as videos on our website, and any survey questions that we do within the meetings will also be posted on our Playbook website for people to be able to participate in. We are also continuing other survey questions. We have some priority surveys that we're doing that are related to these strategy sessions that we will be doing at in-person events hopefully soon. And yeah, we're just going to try and continue the engagement that we have been doing and continue it throughout the process so everyone has a chance to participate. And just some background information, if this is your first strategy session with us, the Kansas City Planning and Development Department is spearheading this effort to update the city's comprehensive plan. Our current plan focus was adopted in 1997, and as these plans typically have about a 20-year shelf life, we are very much within the time frame of we needing to update it for the next 20 years in Kansas City. And the comprehensive plan is going to touch on a multitude of issues and policy areas in Kansas City, but it will primarily be dealing with things that are related to land use decisions and development and how we want the city to grow over the next couple of decades. And just to also give you some background information about our current comprehensive plan, livability and the policy areas, the issues that fall within that umbrella term are not new. Focus has a lot to say about livability and the topics that we'll be covering in this meeting and our future meetings. Basically, it is a way to try and gauge and improve upon the quality of life that people experience living, working, and spending time here in Kansas City. We are looking at a lot of different issues in livability, but probably primarily housing is going to be a major area that we'll be discussing. And of course, Focus had a lot to say about housing. It also has to do with your neighborhoods, your communities, making sure the communities are retaining their sense of character, retaining that sense of belonging that someone experiences living where they want to live in the city. You can go to the next slide. We also want to make sure that the neighborhoods are not just connected within themselves physically, but also through those social connections. But we want to make sure that the communities throughout Kansas City are able to connect with each other in those ways as well. And we want to make sure that our individual communities within Kansas City, everyone has access to the amenities that make their lives a high quality life here in Kansas City. So having access to trails, parks, public transportation, being able to easily access the services that you need on a daily basis, all of those types of things without having to go too far from your own neighborhood. These are all things that add to the quality of life that somebody would experience here in Kansas City, and what we'll be focused on. Also, it's going to speak to, like I mentioned, the character of your community, retaining that the character of the people that have been living there for a while, making sure that they are able to live in the community they want to live in, that they can grow there, that they can spend their lives there if they'd like to. It's also going to have to do with character related to historic preservation. We have a lot of very old neighborhoods in Kansas City, and historic preservation is a really important component to protecting that architecture, that sense of character. And of course, as I said, housing is probably going to be one of the major issues that we're going to tackle here in the livability strategy sessions. Not just making sure that there is housing available for everybody, but that it's affordable, that it's attainable, and that it is quality housing as well. And so that just kind of shows you that focus was also discussing these issues, these policy areas, and we intend to take what focus already created and build upon that for the next couple of decades in Kansas City. So we have our 13 playbook goals here. These goals are still technically in a draft form, but they speak to what we're really trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish with this comprehensive plan. Many of these goals are going to touch on the topics that we're going to cover in livability. Many of these topics are interrelated, and that kind of adds to the complications that can happen with these conversations, but everything is related to each other, and it's important that we keep these goals in mind as we're working towards setting up the recommendations for the comprehensive plan. All right. Oh, you're muted, Travis.
Uh-oh.
There she is.
Jay was muted. Now here I am. Sorry about that, you all. My name is Travis Pendleton. I'm part of the consultant team. I would love today to talk to you all about livability and understand first who's here today, and then get into what your vision for livability might mean. So earlier, Kyle mentioned that we're going to use Minty Meter to gather your feedback. It's just a way for us to keep it all organized. It's also a way to add interactivity in a meeting. And we're going to have a lot of questions for you all today. So Minty Meter requires for you to either have a smartphone or click a link. And I think Becca from our office will put a link in the chat in case that's easier for you. And it will take you to the Minty Meters page for this presentation, and it'll give you an opportunity to comment. If you click that link, it will open up another window in your browser. You could also use your smartphone and scan the QR code that's on the left-hand side of my screen, and then you need to type in this code. Whenever there's a question that we've put into Minty Meter during this presentation, the code that's currently on the left will appear at the top of the screen. It'll be the same code throughout the meeting. So without further ado, let's ask the first question. And the Minty Meter link, if you're using, if you want to click something and get to Minty Meter, that's already in the chat. Thanks, Becca. But here's our first question. Where do you live or work in the city? And I think in this one, if you live up north and work south, you could answer in that way, etc. If we're talking about north, we are talking about north of the river. Central part of the city is between the river and like 63rd Street and Blue Ridge Cutoff, and then south is south of 63rd. There are 73 awesome people in this meeting. So I can see that in Zoom, and I know y'all can see that. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the Minty Meter screen, or on my screen, because I'm sharing my screen with y'all, you can see how many people are commenting. So what that's telling me is that we have about half of y'all commented, and a lot of y'all are from the center part of the city. Give you some more time to comment. Also, if it's easier for you, you can also just put your responses in the chat. Dr. Beth has put his responses in the chat. He lives in the north and works midtown. That's really helpful. If you put comments in the chat, we will also grab them and put them into the Minty Meter. So it's just really important that we can hear from you all today. So we've got almost 50 you have responded. Well, I'm going to go ahead and give you 5 more seconds. And then I have another question for you. And that question is going to have to do with whether or not you've been to any of these strategy sessions before. This is our 3rd topic area, livability is. We've had visibility strategy sessions and we've had mobility strategy sessions. We're just curious how many people have been to some of those other sessions. And so we have 52 responses so far. What I'm going to do is go to the next question. If you are still answering where you live or work, once you respond to that, at the top of your Minty Meter screen, there'll be a blue button that says, basically go to the slide that the presenter's on, and you'll be able to join us there. And you'll be able to always join that way if it's taking you a little bit longer throughout the presentation. So we've got more people so far, and there's 22 of you that have voted that have not been to any sessions. We've got some people that have been to mobility and visibility.
Travis, I see there's a question in the question and answer box that I think Kyle wanted to respond to. Kyle, you're on mute if you're talking.
Yeah, sorry, everybody. Yeah, the question in the Q&A box, and we're trying to keep them in the chats if possible, is crime and murder rate and public safety being addressed? So we are looking at information like that, but we want to be very clear that the comprehensive plan cannot really impact those things as much as be aware of those things. So those are things that we know impact future development as we go forward. And we are trying to make sure that all of the answers that we provide in the recommendations consider those things, but also be very clear on which ones we can and can't address. But it is a part of our society.
Thanks, Kyle. So I can see when we did that, some of you all have attended all the sessions or different types of sessions, and we didn't include a both on here, but thank you for putting it in the chat. We're going to have serviceability is the next strategy session that we'll have. So we will change that. We're going to ask a similar question. So we'll change that so that you can answer for any of them. Because I think this question might be structured as a one or none type of thing. But at a minimum, we know that we've had some participation, at least some of the sessions, and maybe more so in mobility. So let's get into livability and start thinking about that a lot. Morgan talked about livability having to do with housing, and I think that's really, that's one of the big components of the topic, but there are lots of other things. So what we ask you to do today is think in your mind's eye about your neighborhood, or maybe some of your favorite neighborhoods in Kansas City or someplace else that you've visited that you really like. These are the places that you want to live in and that you want to visit often. Maybe these are places that you feel really safe in, safe for you, your family, your friends when they come and visit, places that maybe are affordable for you. These might be neighborhoods that have fun places to visit, like amenities or assets that you enjoy, like the community center, or maybe they have a movie theater or a museum that you like. Maybe these neighborhoods are close to jobs. Maybe they have parks that you think are really, really great, or maybe they have a trail system that's wonderful and you love to enjoy that and you want to tell people about that. When we talk about livability, we're talking about all of those things. And during our discussion today, we're really wanting to know, though, what does livability or neighborhood livability mean to you? So this is going to be our first Minty Meter question that involves some typing. So we would love for you to share what it means to you in one word or phrase. What does neighborhood livability mean to you? And again, you can always put it in the chat because we'll just grab it and put it on screen. If that's difficult, you can always raise your hand and unmute, and one of the panelists will unmute you so you can share out loud, and then we'll put that in the chat and on the screen. Right now, what we're getting in terms of a word or phrase for what neighborhood livability means, we've got walkability on there a few times, resources, convenience, accessible and safe for all, a feeling of community, safe and affordable housing, ability to live car-free, the collective organization of land and transportation use, which creates a synergy that brings health and joy with a smiley face. What else? Sustainability is on here. Inclusive and welcoming is what sustainability means for this person. Quality of life that embraces diverse lifestyles and stages. Neighborhood livability means to some community, interesting surroundings, choices and age of area housing. It also means safety, cleanliness, mobility, and amenities. Let's see a few more. Equity. We've got healthy living on here, welcoming, reliable public and private commitments to residents. What else? We've got a safe neighborhood with diversity in both housing options and people. Also engage diverse neighbors with access to services and amenities. Affordability is on here again, safety is on here, clean and near activities, clean, friendly, and safe and welcoming neighborhood. Walkability with groceries nearby. Here's something new. Energetic, inclusive, diverse. Got sense of community on here. Last one on screen is an authentic place. Some really great feedback. Let's see, is anything different in the chat? In the chat, I see equity in all caps. Working city services is in the chat. Authentic environment and traditional neighborhood feeling. That's in the chat from Greg, along with the idea that most people in vintage or historic neighborhoods are there because of those things. Proper zoning for appreciation of values, assuming you mean property values. Lots of walkability, more equity. So let me ask y'all another question then. This is really a question that's got multiple questions inside of it, which is we really want to know what your vision for neighborhood livability is in Kansas City. And we're thinking 20 years into the future. I know to think about the future, you also got to think about what you like right now. And so we really want to know what you think makes a great neighborhood. And then when you're thinking about that great neighborhood, how would you go about ensuring that all neighborhoods have numerous community assets? We'll give you some examples of what some assets are. I know that you all probably have some in your mind right now based on the responses to the previous question. But within that great neighborhood in the future, how would you make sure neighborhoods are connected? And when we talk about connectivity, we're talking about not only physically, but also socially and culturally. What type of enhanced city services and infrastructure should be provided for neighborhoods in the future? How would you make sure development's diverse and equitable? How would you eliminate disparities? And then even though we have all those questions to ask you today, you may have additional livability questions that you think should be considered for neighborhoods, and we want to know what those things are too. So at the very end of our conversation, we'll ask you for a list of those things. So with that, let's get into the first question. What do you all think makes a neighborhood great? And while that's going on, I think there's some Q&A. Kyle, do you want to grab that? Or Bo?
Sorry, Travis, I'm going to yield to Bo. I'm having off and on computer issues. I'm trying to track it on my phone and cell phone, or it's phone and computer. So Bo, I'll hand you.
Sure. Which question did we want to address, Travis?
This is the Q&A. There's one in the Q&A about things that are being addressed as part of this process.
Sorry. Yes, we are looking at other community planning, especially comprehensive plans. We did kind of a review of national comprehensive plans to see what we would like to emulate, and we're certainly looking during livability. We're looking at kind of what peer cities are doing to address some of the strategies and issues we're learning about through this process as well. So yes, I don't know that we've looked at military necessarily, but if you have a suggestion, please let me know where we might want to look at for that.
Thanks, Bo. So for a great neighborhood, what we have is people. We have preservation of historic architecture. We've got trails, parks, and boulevards and public spaces, a sense of community and belonging, children, friendly neighbors, community solar with on-site large-scale battery storage and community broadband for low to moderate income residents. We've got connections between people, the people first, density and vibrancy, few cars, density of social capital, strong and organized homeowners associations, houses with character and people with character, vibrant, healthy, resilient public realm. We have community centers and natural meeting places. Whenever we think of community, it should always be people first. So a lot about the people so far. We've got distinct character, such as historic Midtown neighborhoods, sidewalks, and diverse neighbors of all ages. A great neighborhood is appealing physically and visually with safety and security. Community engagement. We have community engagement, needs of the community being met, schools, stores, parks, and mixed housing. We have great neighborhood has amenities and walkability, space for gardens, it's safe, it's close to grocery stores and access to transportation. For the transportation network, it's got parks and trash cans. It meets the neighbors and needs of its residents. It's walkable, it's got modern architecture, it's welcoming, visually appealing, stable and accessible. It's got affordability. Great neighborhoods aren't pushing out community members by giving priority deals to developers. Got trees, mixed income housing, or excuse me, mixed housing, multifamily and single family sharing blocks. We've got access to amenities, basics, entertainment, and green space. It's what's meant by amenities. I'll leave these up on screen so you can read them. And then I'll see if there's anything in the chat. Or actually, Becca, do you see anything in the chat that you
We have
can
been
share?
copying everything from the chat over into the Minty, so you've been seeing those live.
Awesome.
Yep.
Got the sense of community with neighbors, taking care of neighbors. We've got the people, parks, and safe walking and biking, accessible paths, trees, gardens, great, fresh, healthy food, diversity. Safety is back on there. Cleanliness is on there. Common places for people to meet, like shops and religious institutions, theaters, restaurants, in close proximity. The plaza is a good example and is connected to other areas. There's another comment about connections, but they're with people and the physical environment. Local ownership and engagement. Neighbors who can trade tools with and ask about home maintenance, people helping people. Effective city services and lower water bills. That makes the neighborhood great, as well as green spaces. I got a yes to trash collection on here. Self-determination for neighborhoods supported by the city and respected by developers. Safety, comprehensive plans that the city upholds, strong neighborhood associations, aesthetic quality, and some more. Lots and lots of really great ideas, you all. Really, really great characteristics. So with that in mind, let me ask you a question that might build on that. With everything that you were saying that makes a great community or a great neighborhood, a lot of you touched on things that we would call like community assets, and also things that you want to be connected to, and so on. So as we look at community assets, we have been able to map some of the assets that are in Kansas City. So we have things that would be considered amenities, or maybe where your schools are, where you get your groceries, where you get healthcare taken care of, financial institutions where you shop, places you might do physical activity like sports, tourist destinations, and we have color-coded them and mapped them here on the right-hand side. What you can see is a lot of them are kind of in the heart of Kansas City. And then you see we've got some up along I-29. And then a smattering there south of Gladstone in Kansas City. But we don't have them throughout the entire city in mass or in clusters. We definitely have defined areas. So how would you ensure all neighborhoods have numerous community assets? How would you go about doing that? And Laura's asked in the chat why green space is not listed as an asset on this map. I don't think that was intentional. We can map parks and things. Jay, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I was going to say the majority of the things listed as sport were also parks, so parks green space.
Okay, starting to get a few responses to the question, how would you ensure all neighborhoods have numerous community assets? Socialism. And again, we're talking about physically, socially, and culturally, these assets. So there were some comments before about great neighborhoods having places where people gather naturally. That's a way to have a great neighborhood and assets on a social and cultural perspective. We're also thinking about physically. PIAC is a way that we can make sure numerous assets, community assets are in neighborhoods. We've got on here changing the zoning to allow local mixed use development, and another zoning comment so that residential areas also allow small retail spaces. There's a comment on here about needing assessments. Economic investment in communities, including subsidies, would be a way to make sure we have numerous community assets. Ensure new development and reinvestment includes assets as a priority. And we've got to distribute assets equally among all neighborhoods. We've got open neighborhood support centers to help provide equitable access to our great tools. Green space is a vital amenity, not necessarily associated with sport. It's health, mental and physical, as well as social. It's good. Each community should have a website that accurately lists its amenities so that people can just look it up and compare neighborhoods to neighborhoods. Let's see, not all places can have all assets, but all should have some assets. As you're thinking about this, I wonder if, for some of you, if there are some definite top assets that communities, that neighborhoods need to have. If you have some thoughts on that, please put that in as well. You can put it in the chat. You can put it on into your Minty Meter. In terms of ensuring all neighborhoods have numerous community assets, other comments are work with neighborhoods to determine and promote local needs. We also have stop NIMBYs from preventing change in new development. We want to eliminate all downtown subsidies and spread the wealth. Shops like coffee shops and community spaces for lunches, local small business, transportation. Neighborhoods need a basic set of infrastructure, and here infrastructure is sidewalk, curb, and gutter, and then prioritize that. Making sure we create more walkable areas to attract private entities like groceries, but also be a way to ensure neighborhoods have community assets or numerous community assets. There's a comment about people in vintage and historic areas. They use blighted assets as an incentive in underserved communities in a transparent manner. Neighborhoods are there for the authentic environment and traditional neighborhood feeling. Challenge corporate community more. Can you elaborate on that, the challenge corporate community more? You might add that into the chat, or perhaps you would raise your hand and share more about your comment there. We want to make sure that we understand them all.
So if any of you all would like to speak freely instead of typing on your tiny device keyboard, just go ahead and raise your hand. You can use the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen, and we can unmute you and let you speak.
Mm-hmm. We definitely want to make sure that we hear from you. Although I know once you get in the mode of typing, you can get in there and feel comfortable, and that's totally fine too. Whatever is most comfortable for you.
Travis, we do have one hand up. D. Weathersby. You should be able to unmute and go ahead and speak.
Thank you. In serving all of the neighborhoods with community assets, I'm familiar with, we've had various tours that have came through the city seeking to place sports arenas, trying to host conventions and things of that nature, or even as simply as an economic development when organizations want to come into a local area. I think it's fair or fairer to show the entire city instead of just a portion of the city where the assets look wonderful and you're hiding and stepping, you don't have to step over homeless people and you don't have to deal with liquor stores or boarded up buildings with no cohesive design to what that area or neighborhood looks like. And as being a fresh import into the area, I am very challenged about the zoning or comprehensive planning or lack of about what should go where. Certain corners just are not appropriate for certain types of businesses anywhere around a walkable residential neighborhood or something like that. So more of a comprehensive plan per neighborhood.
Mhm.
The other thing that I would also encourage is that when we're doing these plans, come to the neighborhood that you're planning about. I don't believe philosophically that you can make a good plan for a place you've never been. When you come and you see the actual neighborhood, we actually invited some planners to our building when the city manager first got in, and they had planned out some things in the neighborhood that they had never even been to. And to me, that is shocking.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you for those comments. I think I saw 2 other hands up. Is that right, Kyle and Bo and Jay? Were there 2 other hands up?
Right now, we don't have any other
Okay.
hands up.
Okay.
I will keep an eye out.
Okay.
Travis, we do have a question or a comment from Steve McDowell. Would like to ask him to elaborate if he possibly could, so we can make sure we get him a direct answer as much as we possibly could. Steve, if you're willing to ask your question.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, this is Steve. Yeah, my question was really is when I looked at the map and I didn't see it long enough to really understand very much. I have elderly eyes on top of that, so I couldn't see it very well. But it just occurred to me when I saw one neighborhood listed that didn't have very much, but it was also an area that's very sparse in population and very small. And I was wondering if the group had tried to correlate the population density of the different areas, or if that's part of the process, and the geographic size of the different areas to the number of assets they had. And maybe that's not that important, but it just, I'm an architect, I look at stuff, I see stuff, and the first question that popped out. And then I'll go ahead and follow up, because I asked the question about crime earlier and was really not, I was so surprised a little bit about the answer, because I think that's directly, I probably should have put that in here. I think, when we were planning the Performing Arts Center, the primary funder of the Performing Arts Center thought downtown was unsafe. And I think that perception, and we of course proved to her that that was not the case, just the opposite. But I think that is a perception about how decisions are made. And I think a plan like this should take it on front and center, because I think, how we design the public realm, how we treat the public realm, how we do a lot of things will help decide whether people decide to do bad things, east of Prospect or not. And so, or any other, I didn't mean to single out that neighborhood, but any other place. So sorry, I went outside the boundaries of my comment.
No, that's okay, Steve. And we weren't suggesting that crime's not an issue at all. That is a component in how we're trying to address certain things. It's just this plan will not have the ability to direct the police department to police things in a different fashion.
It's
What
not
we'll
about
do is-
police. It's not about the police. It's about creating a city that is designed to encourage the acceptable behavior. That's what That's what I
Yeah, and
mean. So,
it will be used in that manner. So I think we're speaking the same language. And related to the density issue, we're not quite there yet. That is probably how we'll use those recommendations in the implementation side. And when it actually comes to extending services and how the city can prioritize services, you know, based on the size and the density and the per capita people in certain areas.
Cool.
Hopefully we can provide them as equally as possible as we go forward.
thank you. Appreciate it.
We did have one hand up from Billy Davies. I didn't know if you wanted to still speak, but if you would, go ahead and raise your hand again and I can promote you. Oh, here we go. You should be able to go.
Thank you so much. I ended up putting my comments into the chat for the hosts and panelists to save time, but just I can recopy it. Sorry, 1 second. Moving the cat from the keyboard. Sorry. Just challenging the corporate community, just ensuring that they're incorporating the city's plans as well. I know that's a lot of work, and there's often limited staff, and we think about how do we enforce these things, but we've been really selective with the way we're responding to folks seeking public benefits, whether that's incentives or TIF or other things, making sure that they're putting people first in the neighborhoods, communities, and the city's goals first. And the city has a lot of great goals that it's working on, from climate protection plan to the advanced KC to this. And so folks who say they want to be community partners have to, walk that talk. And how are we doing that going forward? Thank you.
Morgan, was that the last hand?
Yes, it is for right now.
Okay, so I'm going to go to the next question. This is a question about connections. When we're talking about community assets, we're talking about physically and socially and culturally in terms of assets, but you can also think about connections that way. During the first year or so of playbook engagement, there was a lot of conversation about lots of different topics, including transportation. And some of those comments that are in the playbook's transportation report of engagement also talk about connections and neighborhoods. And so some of the feedback that we gather through that process is what is on screen, talking about creating walkable neighborhoods for people of all types, having connections to adjacent neighborhoods, having easy transportation between neighborhoods and across the city. Those are some samples of things. But we really want to know from you, when you think about making connections to neighborhoods, how would you make sure neighborhoods are connected? And again, we're talking physically, socially, and culturally. So far, we have more transit and bike infrastructure. We've got bike lanes. It's about access, not transportation. Good comment. I think one of the easier things is to think about the physical way we do things, but socially and culturally, there are also great things that can happen too. I know that Kansas City has really great events in particular neighborhoods. One of them that comes to mind is KC Art Garden, which is in the Pendleton Heights neighborhood. That event draws people from all walks of life and all ages to spend time together, to buy things, to enjoy art, but to be together. We've got more transportation like safe sidewalks and streetcar extension on screen. Also have remove minimum parking, which forces stores to spread out. We need east-west connections, safe pedestrian crossing options across busy streets, wide sidewalks. If you can't fit someone in a wheelchair and a parent with a stroller side by side, it's not wide enough. Fewer cars, more buses, pedestrians, and bikes. Expanding the streetcar, east-west, not just north-south. We've got community spaces that are open to everyone, but also connected by free resources like transit. Renovating a single building can spur investment in a community, but it needs to be done with purpose to avoid gentrification. Segregate roads and streets, no more stroads. Protected pedestrian crossings, sidewalks. So lots of physical connections. Really curious what you all think from a cultural perspective. How do we create connections? And also from a social perspective, how do we do that? Brett has his hand raised.
Should be good to go.
Yes, this is Brett Creasy, and I just want to talk a little bit about, kind of connecting neighborhoods in a way where, they have a voice in development because, in the Longfellow neighborhood, we have a great building in the Velvet Freeze building, and there's a developer who is going to tear that down to build, to build a luxury apartment. They were unwilling to work with us in any way, and they're basically just going to do whatever they want, and that's not how this should be. They also changed the zoning, to be able to do this, and did not even engage the neighborhood. So, that shouldn't be how development works in neighborhoods, is what I guess I'm trying to say here.
So is maybe a strategy is to work with neighborhoods more purposefully, to reach compromises with neighborhoods, maybe work in partnership? Okay.
We've got one more hand up. Billy, you should be able to go ahead.
Thank you so much. Just appreciating, at least on my screen, talk about like welcoming community participation and engagement, listening to neighborhoods, and just spot on with what was just said. Often just largely, I feel like it's usually due to resources that we get from the city council. Like we get enough to like start doing the plan. We can fund community sessions for like the start of the plan, but then it kind of for implementation, a lot of that falls on staff. So then the only time where there's like community participation, it's in, a discussion about rezoning or a discussion about a proposed development. Those processes, being a lawyer, I appreciate them and they have a place, but they can be very adversarial, like just at the baseline, like even if everybody's being friendly, like everybody goes in with an objective, are you in favor of this or opposed? And it just creates a dynamic where it doesn't make it easy for folks to collaborate. And there's often folks at unequal footing as far as information and access. Ms. Pendleton, as you said, about being intentional with the community engagement at all stages of this plan, like, making sure that you're continuing to find ways to loop in neighborhood leaders from across Kansas City in the implementation phase, whether that's, advisory boards or having this regular contact with folks from different neighborhoods so that you're building community across, you could say cross culturally across neighborhoods while continuing to amplify this shared vision for what Kansas City wants. So that way, at the very least, folks aren't forgetting, like, hey, yeah, the playbook, we're still using it. We didn't just like talk about it in 2022 and now we're done. This is still our playbook, and it helps folks internalize that. Thank you again. Sorry to ramble.
Thank you, Billy.
We've got a couple more hands. Up next is Brett. You should be able to unmute and go ahead.
I guess I didn't put my hand down.
I gotcha. That's okay. We've got another hand up. Vicky, you should be ready to go.
Can you hear this?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yep.
With regard to the last couple of comments, and I think Greg Allen's in the chat, one of the reasons the city does area plans, the main reason is because the city's so big and different that area plans have to be kind of specified. That's where all the citizen participation and the time and the interest and the resources and the research ought to go into those kinds of issues. If you get to a point where there's a controversial development that's going in, which of course will be ongoing and all the time, that's why you need to rely back on the area plans, because you don't have a controversial thing right in front of you when you're doing those. Those are supposed to be the guidelines and provide the framework for how you critique and deal with and agree with on any new development or infill or redevelopment. So we've slipped a little bit in terms of allowing cases in front of the Plan Commission and the council that they act like this is a brand new thing when the whole issue's been dealt with in the area plan. And I think it's one way to save this. Every single project's a political football problem. And it's worked in Kansas City for a long time. And I think it's going to be even more important as we deal with conflicts between streetcar and neighborhoods and old neighborhoods and new infill and all the kinds of things that naturally people get involved in. So I think it would be really helpful if we kept people going to the area plan development, kept them updated, and then use that group of people to help talk to the developers who are supposed to be talking to a neighborhood no matter what they do. And if they didn't come talk to you in Longfellow, then that's a big gap that should have been fixed. That's not right.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Vicki.
much. I don't see any other hands at this time, Travis.
Okay. Got a lot of great feedback, starting to get more in here about social connections, which is really good, along with the physical and the cultural. I'm going to go to the next question. This question is about city services and infrastructure. What you're looking at right now is the community satisfaction survey that Kansas City does one of those on an annual basis. And one of the questions that they ask is, overall satisfaction with major categories of city services. And so when you look at this, you see things like fire and ambulance service, parks and rec, you see solid waste and the police stations and the airport and water and public transportation, neighborhood services, those type of things. And when you look at that, you see if you're in the darker blue color, the lighter blue is very satisfied to satisfied. Any of the white is neutral and the red is dissatisfied. And for the most part, a lot of this is in the satisfied to very satisfied range. These are networks of services that go all over the city. We are with Livability talking about a smaller scale in terms of neighborhoods. So when you look at this, think about what's going on in your neighborhood, your water, your services, and that type of thing. Just think about your neighborhood. Think about your neighborhood and then think about the future of it. What type of enhanced city services and infrastructure should be provided for neighborhoods in the future? Is there anything that comes to mind? Maybe something more than what we have right now, maybe something better than what's going on right now in terms of services and infrastructure. Often when we think of infrastructure, it's easy to think of transportation infrastructure, to think of water and sewer, to think of utilities, that type of thing inside your neighborhood, your catch basins, your sidewalks, that type of thing. Okay, we're getting pocket solar and wind farms, wide sidewalks, street sweeping to protect the sewers, tree maintenance, community choice aggregation with regards to utility services. People get to choose how they get their power instead of municipal capital, I can't pronounce that, municapitalized utility companies. Microgrids plus battery backup for power resiliency, more bike lanes, increased transportation. Let's see. Some other things, composting would be an example of an enhanced city services and infrastructure. Can you elaborate on the composting? Do you mean the ability to do that? Locations where that could happen that are bigger at your neighborhood level? Could you maybe add some more to your comment there in the chat, or if you want to talk about that verbally, raise your hand maybe so we can unmute you.
We have Taylor. You should be ready to go.
Yeah, so I was with composting. I know there's some paid programs like the KC Compost Collective now, where you can just have a bin and have it outside your house and then just pick it up like on a bi-weekly basis. So I was just thinking something along the lines of the way that recycling and trash is done now. It'd also be great to throw in glass recycling in that as well. That's like, I think those are the two main ones that are not provided at like a local neighborhood level at this point.
Mhm. Thank you, Taylor. Got more street maintenance on here. More trees and fix the streets and sidewalks east of Troost. Better, safer crosswalks and more of them. Traffic calming in residential areas, planting trees, maintaining trees, fewer bike lanes.
We've got
Car
one more
charging.
hand up.
Mhm.
Sunny, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, in addition to what Taylor said, I actually came from a city where they had municipal composting and wood mulch. So all of the compost and scraps that residents turned in went to the municipal stations. And then residents were able to pick up that cured compost and those wood chips from city projects for free the next year. And so it's just a great way to recycle all those materials and lower that carbon footprint.
That's really cool. Thanks, Sunny.
No other hands at this time.
Okay. We've got the car charging stations on here now, more protected bike lanes, grocery stores should be considered infrastructure. Public transportation that considers the last mile from transport to home or destination. And we've got basic services, keep the streets repaired. More landscaping along rights of way. Got enhanced green space and tree protection and cultivation, the curbside composting, ordinances to stop littering, more about the littering problem, community gardens, sewage runoff sacks, the things they put over pipes to keep solid waste from runoff from entering the river. Community policing in all neighborhoods. It's been studied for years and it works. Apartment scale recycling services, broadband accessibility, neighborhood business support services, and children support services. Anyone want to elaborate on that neighborhood business support and children support services? You can put it in the chat or share some more verbally. Got native plantings and medians. Neighborhood dumpsters, a home services that has the power to remove status from slumlords. So it's a home services department, I think. Or maybe a division. Got some more about bike lanes, balance spending on bike lanes with needs of neighborhoods. Waste chemicals, old paint, etc. Limited city disposal, limited hours, one location to my knowledge. So this is advocating for more locations. Got more bike share. Data-driven focus on what is affordable and ensuring there are more homes than people. Fix all the sidewalks. Allow those apartments to also have recycling access. Bulk pickup and more ideas. Lots of ideas here on screen. I don't know that there are any more hands up.
Not at the moment.
Okay, let me go ahead and ask you a question that builds on some of this. This question has to do with development. So we've been talking about, the types of uses you want to see, and you see, like the grocery stores and all of those things. There's even a comment earlier about redevelopment sites. One of the things that Livability focuses on is development overall, but really particularly is putting emphasis on housing. There is a study that is called the Market Value Analysis. That's what the MVA part of that is. It's done by the Reinvestment Fund. And they did it for Kansas City in 2016 and then again recently in 2020, and they did a little bit of a comparison. They have a really full report, and there is a story map that's online that people can look at that describes what their findings were. But essentially, they look at the housing market for all of Kansas City, and then they classify in different types. And what you're looking at are some of the big picture findings. And one of the trends that they saw, is that there's some positivity even in our more urban area, which this is this part that's like south of I-70, right? Of our urban core along Bruce R. Watkins and going east. There's I-70. It's hard to read this map, but this is I-70 coming in through here. So one of the things that they saw is that areas that were distressed in 2016 are now showing signs of a growing market strength, including declines in vacant homes and increases in residential renovation and new construction. We know that there's been a lot of housing construction happening in Kansas City. A lot of that hasn't necessarily been inside the core of the city, but there have been some improvements in the core of the city. Some of their big picture findings are what you see on the right-hand side of my screen. They're talking about signs of strength and then some challenges to be keeping in mind. And one of those signs of strength is that we do have an increasing housing market. We see increases in sales and also increases in home prices. Also, overall, they're finding that homes remain affordable. We do know, though, that there's a big challenge in what is affordable and what the price is that these homes are costing. And so that still remains a big issue. And we're seeing that there's a lot of investor and mortgage interest or activity in our distressed markets. So even though there are some positive things happening, there's still a lot of that we need to think about and that we need to be concerned about. And so as we think about neighborhood housing, we want to keep that in mind. Through the playbook, we've been asking people questions about all types of topics, including housing. And so far, what we've learned is that Kansas Cityans have 5 things that keep coming up in terms of priorities for housing. We've got affordable housing, rental and ownership, neighborhood walkability, prioritizing infill and redevelopment, public transit access, and safe quality housing. And this is from the Livability report that's available on the playbook. It's a summary of the feedback that's all related to housing that we've gathered through the playbook process. And then there are also some quotes that we just grabbed from that report, which also have to do with what people feel in terms of what's going on in their neighborhoods. And I really like that quote at the bottom, which is the center neighborhoods around shops and restaurants, cafes, services, libraries, community centers, and parks. So it begins to talk about, it's not just about housing, but it's all these other things. And then they're creating the mixed income neighborhoods with diverse housing options and without repetitive subdivisions. And those are quotes from that report about all of the feedback that relates to livability and housing in Kansas City so far through the playbook. But we're really interested in knowing, with just a little bit of background, how you would make sure all development is diverse and equitable. I gave you some examples about housing and what people have been talking about in relationship to housing. But if you think about all development, how would you make sure it's diverse and equitable? As we know, all areas of the city aren't the same and they're not experiencing the same circumstances. So what would you do to make sure development is equitable and diverse? Okay, we see listen to community members and not just developers. Center shops around existing neighborhoods. Don't stop development, but create policy so existing residents benefit from it instead of getting displaced. It's really good. Listen to the needs of the immigrant communities. Charge a real estate transaction fee and fund the trust fund. And we know that's the housing trust fund. No more tax incentives for high price or luxury development. Plan around and include green spaces. Bids go to the most blighted areas first, as tax increment financing was designed to do. Take housing off the private market. Use the land bank. So on here. Eliminate parking minimums. Another strategy would be to allow neighborhoods to highlight and anchor themselves to their most valuable physical assets. Invest in all city council districts. Make sure any new development reflects the character of the neighborhood. Another way to make sure all development is diverse and equitable is to prioritize those with the most need and ensure that any development doesn't impact them negatively. We can't dream about cafes, restaurants, et cetera, in distressed neighborhoods until we can address the financing gaps that prevent any of that from happening. Really good comment so far. If you have a comment that's in your mind and you want to share it, go ahead and you can raise your hand. We'll just unmute you so you can share your thoughts with the group. And I see there is a
That
hand raised.
question, that comment about the equity gap or the funding gap is one that we continually find in many of our studies. So finding a way to address the financing side and the investment side is something that we really hope this plan can help us do. So I greatly appreciate that comment.
And there are a couple of hands raised.
Steve, you can go ahead.
Sure. So I totally understand the intent of the question and support it 100%. But is the word all an unachievable goal? If it's just because there's private developers, I mean, I think realistically, it's going to be very, very difficult to say that all is going to be there. Is it more important to say that development is diverse and equitable? I guess is the way I would ask that question. So, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Up next, we have Brett. You should be good to go.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to kind of, say that I think the term blight gets abused and, kind of misconstrued. Every developer that wants TIF, they claim that the area was blighted. And, an example is, the Fidelity Life building that they want to build at 27th and Grand, I believe. They're saying that area is blighted, and that's absolutely not even true. And so I just think maybe we need to have some better definitions of things like that to make sure that those those programs don't get abused.
Do you have a simple way that you describe blight or that you would like to see blight described?
I guess I know it when I see it, and I just know that, that area has a lot of activity, and it's, I guess I don't really have, like a specific, kind of definition, just off the top of my head right now, but I know, I know that is not, what that was intended for, and that is not the area.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Brett. I've got one more hand up. Mara, you should be ready to go.
Hi. So I just want to refocus and talk about the development is diverse and equitable is to ensure that people have homes, not concerned for the people that are creating the homes having profit. And so when we are talking about development, this is a human focused interest. It's making sure people have houses so they're not unhoused and potentially more in detriment to their own humanity. And so the focus should be all, and I just want to affirm that.
Thank you very much. I believe we don't have any more hands raised at this moment.
Okay. Let's look at a few more of these questions. We have, I think, 2 more questions to ask y'all, so I'm trying to be mindful of our time. But I really appreciate this question, this comment in the middle. Don't just listen to the needs of immigrant communities, act upon them and fulfill those needs. Too much listening and not enough doing. There's another one about implementing the People's Housing Trust Fund, supporting West Side housing. Incentivize rehabilitation of abandoned buildings and along Truce and on the east side, and shifting priorities to give equal footing to smaller projects is good for neighborhoods, job creation, and to increase the range of affordable housing options. Structure TIF to avoid gentrification and give tax safeguards to existing low-income residents. Develop an incentive tool that can only be used in distressed areas. And make sure public funding has an equity component. Don't let homeowning elites have a veto over change and growth. Link incentives to diverse residents. Give more time for neighborhood response to development. Require developers to work with neighborhoods as early as possible. There's one about pooling land bank properties in a neighborhood together, and then have Public Works improve the infrastructure and then sell as a block to developers, requiring making a requirement to have strong affordable housing percentages and enhanced services. It's a comment about leveraging the Federal Reserve. And many more comments. Some more about incentives. Freezing property taxes on residents of distressed areas for some number of years. Gentrification is a real problem. When we try to get to these goals, we need to develop plans and processes that recognize that. Okay, for time, I'm going to go to the next question with you all. So we've been talking about the future neighborhood, what your vision for it is, you know, what it means to you, what's a safe neighborhood, not a safe neighborhood, excuse me, what is a great neighborhood? What kind of assets does it have? How do we create connections in that? Again, we know that all the neighborhoods aren't the same, so we want to be sensitive to that, but we want to make sure we have really great neighborhoods. When we're doing all that and making those improvements, and some of you are getting to this idea when you comment on some of the other things, which is how do we eliminate disparities in neighborhoods? How do we do that? Because you have made given a lot of great ideas for how to make these great neighborhoods. How do we make sure we don't have disparities in them? First couple of comments in response to that are prioritize sidewalk repair and building. All neighborhoods should have sidewalks. Equitable, not necessarily equal distribution of resources to neighborhoods to right wrongs in KC. Redistribute wealth. Housing. If you shared housing, please elaborate more on what you mean specifically in relationship to housing. I know sometimes when we see that, we're talking about diverse housing, housing design, mix, cost, lots of things. Please elaborate on that. We also have viable and quality education, which is science, art, social responsibility, etc. Also, if you share that viable and quality education, I know you've given some examples, but can you elaborate on how that would help eliminate disparities in neighborhoods? Are you thinking about wealth building through that? Can you share some more? Put it in the chat on Minty Meter, or maybe ask to unmute. While you're thinking about that, some other ideas for eliminating disparities in neighborhoods. We've got more incentives for homeowners versus large developers. Listening to the neighborhoods. Got the cost of housing. The city needs to stop ignoring homeowners associations and work with them to support their rules to keep their associations safe and clean. We've got elect a mayor and city council that will act in the best interests of the citizens and not developers and businesses. City has existing services that people don't know they can use. Market and inform folks of the services they have to improve their lives. Another way to eliminate disparities in neighborhoods is to revise the city budget process to force remedying disparities. Another idea, policies and systems for people to benefit from development. So gentrification doesn't cause displacement. And then we have shared prosperity. More ideas include repeating the freeze property taxes idea for residents. So this is a repeated comment. In distressed areas so that they aren't forced out. Definitely want to avoid things like displacement and gentrification. We know that's a big issue and that's an equity issue that has been throughout all of our playbook conversations. We've got another idea. Okay, we've got a short list of minimums for a decent neighborhood and focus on those first and then across all. So a short list of minimums for a decent neighborhood. We'd love to know what some people think are what would be on that short list. I think there are a few comments on the previous question when we asked what makes a great neighborhood and then what community assets are most important. I think there's a few responses to that, but if you have if you want to elaborate on what might be on that short list, please do. Another comment about the city's neighborhood self-assessment plans. They have good recommendations in them based on how distressed the neighborhood is and includes getting private sector partners. Yeah, the neighborhood assessment reports are so awesome because they go through the assets, the barriers, et cetera, that are in all of Kansas City's neighborhoods when they were done at that time, which I think is in the early 2000s that was done. And then they talk about what the neighborhoods can do themselves, what they need help with, like if they need a partner or if they can do something with the city, what that is. Really great recommendations in those. Other comments on here, which are ensure all neighborhoods have access to and are educated about using basic services like PIAC, code enforcement, bulky item pickup, social services, 311. Involve people ignored by neighborhood associations like the renters, the immigrants, and non-English speakers. That's a way to eliminate disparities. Defund the KCPD. Get rid of HOAs. Ban HOAs. Require institutions to have diverse resident, board, and committee appointments. Change won't happen if residents, I think aren't at the table, if they don't have a seat at the table. Provide more centers for people experiencing homelessness in all neighborhoods. Provide more overnight shelters and warming centers. Some do not want to travel across the city to reach one. Provide services in the neighborhoods to help. Lots of pretty robust comments in this section for eliminating disparities. If you have something that's on your mind and you want to just go ahead and talk it out, raise your hand. You'll be unmuted, and then we'll record that and pop it on the screen. Also, if you want to elaborate on one of your comments, if you've been commenting through the Minty Meter, please do that too. But you need to raise your hand so we can hear your voice and have you unmuted. There's a recommendation to look at the focused neighborhood assessments, refresh them by going through the process again, and allow them to reflect what has happened in the last 25 years and the vision for how to move forward. Develop an easy to find and transparent site that tells people what for and where all the money is going. Support community development financial institutions and community banks. To eliminate disparities, another idea is that the city should not recognize neighborhood associations that are limited to property owners. HOAs should not be given the same input and support as groups that include tenants. Another idea is to increase funding for city social workers to help out neighborhoods who have issues with people facing homelessness instead of using police to shoo out people like they are rats. And that whole issue has been in the news a lot recently. When we raise the standard of living for the most poverty-stricken residents, the entire city will see an improvement. Another comment is that neighborhoods should have should be supported and enabled to chart their course. The neighborhoods that advance usually have activists who make things change. And that also ties to what we hope to gather from this playbook experience is to identify champions who can help propel the plan forward as we're drafting it, as well as when the final is done and we're into implementation. It's always important to have champions citywide and in your neighborhood. Another idea, local areas for assisting people facing various struggles. In need of food, shelter, clean clothes, or shower. Some supportive services. Make neighborhood associations more democratic, so they truly represent the people living in the neighborhood, not the elites with time and resources to donate. And then it's ban payday lending in neighborhoods. Don't give corporations the same rights as they give people, or say we give to people. Okay, lots of comments still coming. If you're still forming your answer or your response to this question, go ahead and keep doing that. But I am going to go to the very last question. You will be able to hit the blue button at the top of your screen to join me when you're ready. Our final question is, what additional livability questions should we be considering for neighborhoods as we go forward? And when I say as we go forward, I mean in these livability conversations that are informing what will ultimately be recommendations in the comprehensive plan. You really need to get your ideas and things that you think we should be considering so that we come up with the right types of concepts, the right types of recommendations that support those ideas, and so on. So there could be something that we're missing that is important. So I see questions focused on health and safety of children. Do we have all the voices represented? Who is missing? What's the best way to integrate it and value it? Excellent comment. Another question is, how can the city help raise people's income to keep up with housing and other costs? There could be some other things. Give you some time to think about that and share it. You can also, like I said before, we want to hear your voice as well. So if you'd rather talk it out, just go ahead, but just raise your hand. The city can help raise income by attracting jobs. So we're getting some responses in that. How do we prepare for climate refugees? Imani has her hand up. And also we need to engage the churches.
Go ahead, Imani.
Yeah, that's the point I want to bring up. I really would like to see a lot more engagement and interaction with the churches, since they really are the hub of the neighborhoods in the inner cities. On a lot of different fronts, there are ways that we can have entry points of conversation with the churches, not only with the pastors, but also with the church membership. And I really would like to see more outreach to the churches to be involved in these types of discussions.
Thank you, Imani. Imani was commenting, some more ideas have popped on screen. I want us to always ask about the timeline. People are literally dying while we're waiting. They will and are literally dying while we're waiting. How do we prepare for climate refugees? It's a question that we should ask. How to maintain, preserve the historic architecture and flavor of neighborhoods during redevelopment is another question. Also, the idea that we charge people a tax to live and work in the city. Meanwhile, wealthy developers continue to get tax breaks. So we need to be thinking about that. Are we reaching a broad representation of the city, those that don't have access to Zoom? Is anyone living in a neighborhood able to access necessities like food and jobs without having to travel a long way? Need to think about that. Also ask citizens if they are happy with all the trash and panhandling through the city that is out of control and growing daily. Something else, we should be asking how we can prevent historic preservation from being a hindrance to growth and change. There's a comment about hoping that we develop realistic ways and strategies to get things done, not just mention a goal that cannot be reached without serious strategies to accomplish them. It's a good comment about intentionality. Reducing the urban heat effect of concrete, less concrete, more green space. You can make parking lots, grass fields, and with just chicken wire over it to protect it from cars. So some more about environmental responsibility. Another question we should ask is, how can it always become accessible? So another comment about climate change and how it's going to have a major impact on our physical environment. We will see more weather extremes, hot, cold, drought, flood. And this will fundamentally alter habitat, energy, physical infrastructure demand. And we need to mitigate and educate around that topic. Okay, I need to leave Kyle and Jeff a couple of minutes to close. And so if you are still commenting on this question, responding about the other questions that we should ask, I think we have some pretty good categories of questions that we should be asking. So I really appreciate your comments and your time today. Keep on adding to this list. I'm going to go to our closing slides, but you can still add your comment. You should still be able to do that.
Thanks, Travis. I will touch on just a little bit, and then I will yield to Director Williams as we go forward. We just want to say how very happy we are with the feedback that everybody's given us. But we also want to make everybody aware that there are 2 more options to talk about this in this meeting format, and then also the webpage has a lot of options for you to provide feedback in that way. If there's a group you would like us to talk to, please make sure you reach out and we'll contact them, or they can contact us. But once again, could not be happier with the results and the recommendations you guys have given us so far. Thank you very much. Travis, you and Jay did an awesome job as well. Director Williams, I will yield to you.
Yes, again, thank you all for participating. Again, thanks to our department staff and our consultant support. You know, the question in my mind, what makes a great meeting? First, the volume of participation that you all gave, and the manner and way you're willing to communicate us on multiple fronts. Know that we were here through the meeting capturing all comments and positioning them so we can use them as we structure moving the conversation forward. And we look to reach out, you know, to those folks that so you say who's not a part of the conversation. So your feedback helps us get there. Again, I'm really appreciative of the comment, the feedback, the thought, the time for people not only to reference suggestions, but where we could look and see how other communities did certain things. This was really a wonderful first conversation. And while the screen depicted what may feel like 2 more very specific opportunities by comment, our site is open 24/7. We take comments at all times and all throughout the process. It doesn't mean we need to convene all of us to get your feedback one-on-one. Our website facilitates that. Call us, we'll come out and see you. We're looking forward to the day when we are able to look at in-person options just as robust as our online options. But I thank everybody much for their time and their attention and their focus and really their thoughtfulness and ultimately their passion for Kansas City and the way in which they want to see Kansas City grow and develop over the next 20 years. So thank you all very much. Again, thanks for your time and attention. Thanks to all staff. And please, we welcome more comments. Don't be shy. Please keep in touch with us and we will do the same. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you all so much. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.